Lopez, and I've been practicing as a clinician for the last 25 plus years. And I own a mental health center in Washington, D.C. that specializes in working with trauma and addictions, but also operates from the belief that our human system is amazing and beautiful and adaptive, and it does what it needs to do to get us through all the challenges that life throws at us. And some of those adaptations or some of those survival strategies can, over time, end up causing us struggle and different types of ways related to mental health. But our system always has other ways to rewire or rework that stuff. And so everyone at my center has postgraduate training in brain or body-based therapies, because what we've come to find out, there is a whole part of our system that doesn't respond to words and intellectual thought and needs shifts on a deeper level to really see the kind of results that we want to do. So that's where we're coming from, and that's who I am. Well, that's part of who I am. And today's topic, let me see how I exactly worded it, is called Existential Dilemmas Brought On by Corona. And I know this is not the same for everybody, but we are in a historical change in our society, and it's impacted people in various different ways. People have lost jobs, people have gotten sick, society has shut down in the ways that we knew it before. And activities and friendships and social types of gatherings are fundamentally changed. Anyone who has any significant life events during this time period are not honoring them in the normal, usual, customary rituals that we've come to know and depend on for acceptance of whatever, and celebration or grief around whatever those life events might be. And those are things like graduations and births and deaths and marriages. There are all types of things that we normally commemorate and we work through in a certain way that just are not happening right now and are not able to happen in the ways that they normally would through connection. And so what has happened for a lot of people? We start to, first of all, look more squarely at the fact that we are all going to die, right? And that we have this finite time on the planet. And it starts to bring up all kinds of other questions about who am I and what's important to me, when lots of things are stripped away and we're, in quarantine or staying in place. There's this opportunity to really reevaluate what our values are, what's most important to me, how do I spend my time, how was I spending my time, and then obviously the next question is, how do I want to spend my time going forward when some of these limitations are lifted. So just something to note, I called it an existential dilemma, and you may or may not consider that you're in any type of existential dilemma. But I will say that for people who are really looking at big questions about life and themselves, what's my purpose? What's my value? As opposed to what are my values? It can often be correlated and related to a number of mental health symptoms that you may or may not be experiencing. Things like depression, things like isolation, things like OCD, or things like anxiety. Because when you're looking at what are kind of the fundamentals of who I am, it can cause these ruptures in your sense of yourself. And for some people, it also brings up the idea of like, what is this world about, and what is life about beyond what I know kind of in this mortal existence? And what I think is that there are actually an awful lot of opportunities in these moments, even while they may be causing significant distress or discomfort. And why are there opportunities? Because one of the things that happens when you start to ask some of these questions, and I have certainly talked to many people where they're having these types of questions of themselves, like, what am I meant to be doing? And how do I want to be spending my time more consciously? They aren't easy questions to answer, but I'm going to go through an exercise today to help you start to look at and deconstruct some of this for yourself. And as always, we'll spend some time doing the exercise, but you can always spend more time at a different time because some of the questions on this particular exercise take a moment to answer. One of the things about an existential dilemma, and I don't know if you relate to that for yourself right now, is people only embrace something like this if they are engaging in kind of a significant amount of thought and self-reflection. And when you invest that kind of like care and love and acceptance of yourself, there are usually pretty profound revelations that will show themselves. So that's my wish for each one of you. And for anyone who hasn't been on one of these calls before, my format is I basically teach a little bit about a topic, then we do an experiential exercise, and then I open up the space for people to either experience share or to ask questions. I usually manage the questions in the chat, but if you want to talk to everyone, you just unmute your microphone, which is the lower left corner of the screen. And you are welcome to start asking questions or making comments at any point, even while we're doing the exercise, if you want to. And the last thing is I'll say, if there's something you want to share or something that you want input on that feels private to you and you don't want, all these strangers to hear about it, it's fine in the chat when you go over to the right side of the screen to just click. If you click the drop down under everyone, you can select to just talk to one person, and you can just talk to me privately, and I'll know if you wrote something privately that you want me to keep your identity confidential, and I'll answer the question for everyone, because chances are if you have the question or situation, someone else does too. So here's the exercise. It's actually, it's a writing exercise. And so if you have pen and paper, pull it out right now. And it's an exercise that was created to help you dig deep within yourself, about yourself and about your true essence. So as best as you can, the instructions are to actually write your answers to these questions as best you can from your most authentic self, not from the self that might answer based on what you were taught others would want to hear, or even the self that's reflecting on how you've done things in the past or how you wish you would do them in the future, but actually just the truth of what's true for you, if that makes sense. And you'll hear in the questions, because you might be pulled to answer one way or the other based on aspiration of what you wish was true, or past experiences of things that had been true that may or may not be a reflection, again, of a social contract. We're trying to get at your core essence without judgment. So bear with me. The first few questions actually refer to yourself as an animal. I don't have to say it that way, but the idea is to strip away expectations from other people. So it's like, so the first one is, the animal in me loves fill in the blank. And that's the question. So it's just like, what do you love without it being what other people have told you you're supposed to love, right? Like, what do I authentically love? And this can be passions. It can be obsessions, like things that you just like can't get enough of because you love it within yourself. You're like, oh yeah, I love this music, or I love this, show, or something like that. It can be related to lifestyle choices or different orientations, the things that you really care about, that you really love to do. Things that you think about a lot can be an indicator of something that you really love because it's just authentically kind of coming up in your mind over and over. And also things that you notice when you're doing it, you're really engaged with it, like you're really emotionally present. So, this is one of those questions that can be just a total inventory, a list of things that come up for you. So, I'll give you a second to reflect on that. Okay, so leave a little bookmark here. Again, these are the types of things you can spend more time with at a different moment. I'm going to move on to the second one. So, and actually, let me add something and I'll come back to this at the end. There are 7 questions. One of the things you want to be thinking about this is kind of the why and the how, and we're going to get back to that at the end, like why do the things that you love and how you love them. So the second one is the animal in me needs, and you fill in the blank and you add in a list. The animal in me needs, and you want to write down, and not because other people told you that you need them once again, but like, what are your wants and your longings? What are the things that you know that you are missing right now or are just in too short of supply in your life, and that like the absence should be informing the answer to this. The animal in me needs. Okay, now some of you are still writing, but you can again just bookmark it and go back. This is something that will actually help you through and to get clarity with the types of existential questions you may be having right now in this pause. So the third question is, the animal in me craves, and then it's a fill in the blank. This is our last animal question. So you want to be as honest as you can with yourself about this because the craving word is important here. This is the things that you are addicted to. Without judgment, these are the things that you just can't get enough of, that are more of a craving, um, that it feels like it's insatiable. You just can't get enough, you can't do enough of. Okay, and move on to number 4, just in the interest of time. Again, you can come back to it. So number 4, I have become fearful of, and then fill in the blank. I have become fearful of. And these are things that in my world, as a clinician, we might call a trigger. We've talked about triggers now. I think this is our 6th or 7th week doing this. So during especially in the first one, I really defined what a trigger is for you. But it's the type of thing that kind of sends you off into another place. The things I have become fearful of, and start to list them. And so it might be, even logically, that something is fine and it's not going to hurt you, but something in the present day, like a loud noise, sends you down a whole different path of experience, even if pretty quickly you can rationally explain it to yourself. That might be an example of a trigger. And maybe the loud noise jolts your system back to something you experienced in your childhood that was hard or hurtful or scary. And that's the trigger. So I have become fearful of, so things that set you off or end up inhibiting you. Okay, I'm going to move on to number 5. I have learned to become, and this is a fill in the blank also. I have learned to become, and you list your acquired adaptive personality traits. What are the things and abilities, um, that have helped you adapt? Positives about your physical and emotional condition, and positive personality attributes. And these are things that maybe in your life have come to define you. Again, this is tricky because you want it to be authentic, not necessarily something that someone else told you you needed to do to be okay in a situation. Acquired, adaptive, positive traits and abilities. So the sixth one is just the counterbalance to number five, because five are your positive, adaptive personality traits. And so number six is I have become, and then fill in the blank. So this is an opportunity to list your acquired negative adaptive traits and things that inhibit you from doing what you want, things that you've learned over time. So these may be, they can be learned over time, or they can just be a way that you transact in the world. They might be struggles in your physical and emotional condition, qualities that you have seen have sometimes undermined what you want. And the last one is number seven is sometimes hard for people. And this gives a space for a questioning about um, who you are and what you're about. That really gives space for some of the personal things that you might be playing around in your mind, and to actually express them and get them out on paper. So number seven is a place and space for you to jot down your unanswered questions. So the directive is to identify things about yourself that you've been unable to understand. So things about yourself that puzzle you or that seem illogical. And they could be things that seem like a paradox to you. So I want to talk a little bit about these seven questions, because they're meant to be an opportunity to dig little deeper and to look at who you are, or to start to look at who you are without judgment. And the ideal goal, as the goal with any dilemma, is to find more inspiration or direction around creating the life that you want to be living, as opposed to the space where life is just happening at you. And that you might find yourself, as I certainly have, reflecting on my ideas of who I was before this coronavirus time period and recognizing, wow, I think I had this idea of who I was that was very different than what I was actually living or what I was actually doing. That has certainly happened for me in this time period of slowing down. And I'll just share one of those things is that I, and it wasn't until like the second week of being in quarantine that I realized this, but I was shopping at the grocery store for the person I wanted to be rather than the person who I was or the life that I was living. So I was always buying, I'm a vegan. I call myself a high maintenance eater. I'm a gluten-free vegan. And so I buy a lot of produce and a lot of fresh food. And oftentimes at the end of my very busy day, having 4 kids and a business and all of these things, I didn't have the energy to cook the kind of things that were in my mind's eye when I bought them at the grocery store. And I live in an urban environment. And, because I have privilege, I would just order food for the family because I was done. I was so tired. I'd been driving around to activities for the kids. And I realized that kind of paradox a couple of weeks into wait, I'm so sorry. I did something that I didn't want to do. Okay. There we go. And so I realized in my mind I was holding a construct of who I was that I wasn't actually living and doing, because with our slowed down schedule and with the lack of commute and my travels all canceled and all of this stuff, now we actually are cooking in that way. And I realized, wow, there was a lot of waste going on there, but it brought up, and this was the dilemma for me, is that the life I had constructed didn't allow the kind of time for something that I hold a really high value with, and I wasn't able to actually live my life in that way. So what does it mean? It means if I want to live my life in that way, I'm going to have to change some things somewhere about the life I had constructed for myself. And so I see in this opportunity of this downtime in this very different environment a chance to get clarity so that I can have the courage and the discipline to set boundaries or limits on things in my life so that I'm actually taking actions with the things that I value. So just for you to reflect on, okay, first of all, we just did this in a very condensed time frame. When I do this with people live, it takes a lot longer because people are in a space of reflection and expression. Part of the power of this exercise isn't the answers per se, it's the action of doing it to get it out of your system. And rather than having some of these thoughts and ideas swirling around in your psyche, they're actually, when they're expressed, you get some relief internally if it's causing you anxiety in any way, as a lot of these types of questions tend to do if they're just kind of circling around in your system. But you also get that opportunity to then look at your piece of paper and look at what you've reflected and look at it in a different way, in a more conscious way. So the first 3 questions are actually about you. Because of that preface with the animal piece, it's meant to be core things that are just true about you that you're answering as you know them. The next 3 are more about things that you have come into based on what the world has taught you. And so these have more to do with your acculturation of the life that you have been living up until this point, right? What are your cravings? What are you fearful of? What have you learned to become? What are some of the negatives that you might, or things that you might experience as negative that are more related to an adaptation? And then this last one really embraces the existential piece of the exercise. So in looking at this, and I want to move this because we're right at that halfway point when I switch over into people kind of sharing experiences, asking questions, and or sharing resources with the group. I want to say that the goal of doing something like this is actually to gain more clarity for yourself. And to be more conscious, or to let if you're experiencing an existential dilemma, which many, many people are right now, that it gives you a bit of a framework to start to see what's relevant for you as the individual that you are.